So, welcome to the Embodied Woman podcast, a home for the authentic creative. We are so delighted and honored to have Dr. Jenn Chrisman here. I love
Hi.
I love your
Hi.
shirt. I love the little
Oh my God, it's
thumb
like
pockets.
Madonna.
I just found this in the bottom of a drawer
See?
years ago. I forgot I even had it. So
It's super cute.
I love it so much. Yes, I was just telling Siri that we've been seeing each other quite a bit lately in our hot Pilates class, and how yesterday I thought I was gonna die. I thought I was gonna like pass out. And usually I'm like, I push myself because I'm like, I will not be the girl that gives up, but I thought I was gonna pass out. So I literally went down to my knees when everybody else in the entire class was standing. I'm like, it's either that or lay down or pass out or exit the room. So I'm just gonna go down onto my knees and just let everybody else keep standing.
sometimes we just have to meet ourselves where we're at. And I have certainly been there myself inside of those classes. And also don't tell my husband because I'm really trying to get him to come with me to the class.
I won't tell him that I almost died.
Yeah.
Oh, he should totally come. No, I think it's amazing. And I'm already signed up for tomorrow, and I love it. It's just some days your body's like, maybe take it down a little bit. Maybe listen to your body. So anywho, okay, we're going to start. I'm going to read your bio and then we're going to dive in because we have so many questions and we're so excited.
We are.
Can I just say really quickly before I read her bio that I have known Jenn for a long time. And our lives have kind of, we've come together and then we go apart and we come together. But my first studio that I owned in Hermosa Beach many moons ago, she was a member. And I remember when I was starting to go through having my spiritual experience, and she was already, I think you were already on yours. And I don't know for how long, but so it was like, there's this kind of recognition. And I was like, okay, I think I recognize what's happening with her, because I think that's what's happening with me. So anyway, it's like so cool to be here in this moment with you after all these years of our own personal journeys. And now we get to share it with the world. So, okay.
I'll add to that too, just really quickly, because there's another component that I think is so sweet to this process, which is that we're also raising our daughters alongside each other in, as we've been going through our own personal evolutions and as mothers, and our daughters take dance together. And so it's just really sweet to see all of the ways in which our paths have continued to just, keep coming back. And that little nudge, that little tap on the shoulder of like, hey, kindred spirit, how you doing?
Totally. I know. I love that. That's very sweet. Thank you for mentioning that. It is quite divine. All right. Are we ready to hear about the amazing Dr. Jenn Chrisman?
Yes.
She is the founder and dreamer behind the Embodied Life Academy and the Love Your Truth podcast. Jenn teaches about feminine leadership, embodiment, soul activation, money, wealth, and confidence, because these were the areas of her own life that she needed to heal and so desperately sought help for through much of her own life. In 2017, Jenn's mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and this was a truly pivotal moment in the trajectory of her life. Jenn had been learning to listen to that still small voice inside, the voice that has always known the truth, as much as fear wanted to silence her. She left her marriage, began the slow process of unraveling her private practice as a doctor of psychology, and made the decision to go all in on her divine purpose to support other women in embodying their truth, magnifying their influence, and paving the way to bring others with them. Jenn is on a mission to help as many women around the world free themselves from the silent struggle we have been conditioned to carry and to remember the truth of who we are. She is here to create a legacy in which healing, transformation, and the awakening of the authentic soul our authentic soul is not only celebrated, but fundamental to the human experience. I mean, that sounds like perfectly aligned with exactly why we do this podcast and the path that we are both on individually, and as co-hosts of this podcast and as friends and just as women on this journey. So, I mean, it's perfect. It's
Thank
perfect.
you. Thank you, Jenn, for doing, do we call you Jenn or Dr. Jenn?
You can call me Jenn.
Okay. Thank you for doing the work, and I'm sure the continued work, because we're always doing it, that you do, so that you can be on your mission and that you can help all of these humans in the way that you do. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm doing the best I can.
We all are.
We're doing the best we can. I know.
That's all we can do.
You know what when I was reading your about page on your website, I was struck with how, we know people, but we don't really know their story, right? And your story includes your father's suicide, your addiction in your family with your mother, poverty, abuse. I mean, right? And I just think like, it's so fascinating to me because, like I said, we meet people in our day-to-day lives and we see them and we kind of on the surface share about how life is going, but we have no idea the story behind what brought us to this moment. And so I honor you for sharing all of that. And however you feel comfortable in sharing, I would love to hear, because I think it's really important. It's an important part of how we've become who we are today.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I think that on one hand, there's a very interesting little dance that we get to do with our past. And, with everything in life, there's a continuum that exists. And, for myself, my story existed on a continuum where for so many years, like I mentioned, actually in my about page, there was almost this badge of honor that I wore attached to the story of having been a survivor, which ironically still kind of kept me in a victim role. Because the truth is, I was a victim for, as a little girl.
Yeah.
And, and then as an adult, I worked so hard to try and overcome or put forward a face. Like I wasn't that person. I wasn't where I came from.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of my story, which was, growing up in these conditions with both parents being addicts. I always say my parents had no business being parents, and they were very young. And thank God I had my grandmother, because she was my saving grace. And she raised me for most of my young childhood. I didn't even start living with my mom until I was later elementary school. But I worked so hard to put forward a face, right? The mask of accomplishment, success, achievement, right? Look a certain way, drive a certain car, like, check all of those boxes, thinking that if I did all of those things, then I wouldn't still be attached to the pain of how I grew up. And so for me, the integration of my story has been acceptance and finding peace with it without necessarily always having to lead with it, right? So again, it's a funny little dance that we do in terms of, I always say we're in a continual process of reconciliation with the aspects of ourselves and renegotiating our relationship with. And so it's interesting because I actually haven't heard my story in a while. And so hearing you share that, I was like, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All of those things, all of those points, all of those experiences in my life, which today I truly have found a relationship of so much gratitude, because it is such a big part of who I am, and um, you know, how I've come to understand myself and the world around me.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love how open you are now about it all, and how, like, when I knew you, I didn't know you deeply, but the perception was she's a very successful therapist, you know. And like that's exactly what you talk about, how you did that, right? You were married and you had the nice this and the nice that, and you were very successful in your business, and to the outside world it's like, oh, she's got it all, right? She's achieved everything and she's got it all. But like you said, there was something inside that you were like, this is not it, right? This is not it. And so many women that I meet, and I'm sure that you work with, that's where they have arrived. Like, okay, I did everything I thought I was supposed to do and still feel quite unfulfilled. What the hell?
Yeah, that's it. Like, right? Like we have been sold this story.
And so I was just thinking, Lori said those exact words. We've been sold a story. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. That if I follow this plan and I check those boxes, then I'm going to fill in the blank, which I think for so many of us, there is a common theme that is woven within the collective, that is around enoughness.
Hmm.
Right? That if I do these things, then I will have that feeling inside of me that I'm
Hmm.
enough.
Yeah.
Mm.
Pandemic of not enoughness.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where do you think that originated from? What is the origin of that?
Oh, I mean, where do we start? I really do. I mean, I think it is a collective wound
Hmm.
that has been carried and passed on from generation to generation through the lineage of women. And um, you know, I mean, where do we want to go with this? I think that, you know, it's been very interesting to watch with everything, right? Like life is always working in cycles. And we can, you know, we just look to nature and we see that there's always a cycle. And the same is true for the stories within our collective cultures. And, you know, for so many years, women were silenced and, you know, power withheld. And again, everything exists on this continuum. And, you know, for centuries, women were practically erased from the stories.
Hmm.
And, you know, in the last 100 years or so, in this reclamation, if you will, the desire to reclaim our power, I think what happened is the pendulum
Mm.
swung.
Yes, the
It-
overcompensation.
A hundred
Hmm.
percent.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think this piece is so important for all aspects of our life, because it's in the swing of the extremes from one end of a continuum to the other end of the continuum where we see, whenever we're at the ends, whenever we're on like extreme points, something's out of balance. It's not actually the healthy place. But we need to know this in order to find right relationships somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Right. And so I think for so many of us, right, in this, like this desire to find our strength, to find our power, we went into, and we followed the path, a very masculine path,
Hmm.
right? And we abandoned our femininity, which is, I think, for most of us, you know, such a source of power. And you know, that's why so many women today are looking to find healing in their relationship and really find what actual true strength within themselves means and looks like, without it having to be attached to achieve, accomplish, perform, succeed, all of those things.
Yes. Yeah, totally. I'm just
Go ahead,
letting you,
Jenny.
Amber.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, I mean, because I don't want to take over, but I
You're
mean,
good.
this is what we talk about all the time, right? Like, and for so many of us, we were not modeled that being in our feminine
Mhm.
was strength,
Mhm.
was, was acceptable. And, um, kind of like with the pendulum, right? Like the two sides of the coin, like being in our feminine is also being in tune with our intuition and our emotion and the shadow aspect or whatever, the feeling of my emotionality and my sensitivity, which is the embodiment of the feminine in its most powerful way, has also been felt and experienced as weakness and something
Mm-hmm.
not attractive,
Right.
right? And so, especially in my last relationship, like it felt unsafe for me to be sensitive. It was not something that was received well. And so it was like, toughen up, toughen up. And so I did.
Yeah.
And then I completely disconnected
Mhm.
from my natural essence of the divine feminine. And
Mhm.
so it's about, reclaiming that or discovering what that even is, finding strength in it, finding ways to access it that feel empowering. And, we talk about, I mean, for me, dance,
Mhm.
breath work, you know,
Journaling. Yeah.
journaling, pleasure practices, like just these ways to soften into that. And I find some resistance even sometimes with that, like, just like of the conditioning, like I should be doing something, I should be performing, I should be. And then I have to remind myself, like, no, my power as a woman is to soften into the feminine. So yeah, I would love to hear about your journey with that and what your practices are. When you find yourself kind of being more in your masculine, um, what you do and what helps
Yeah,
you.
yeah, it's definitely been a journey for me as well. Um, and it's so interesting to just, because I can analyze.
Like nobody's
Every-
business.
oh my gosh. And I always kind of giggle and I laugh at myself in this process of looking at just how complicated and dynamic each of us can be, and really bringing some humor and lightness to this practice and to this process, because like everything about me is kind of a walking contradiction.
Mhm.
um
I
you know
can
on,
relate.
on the one hand, I am like such a high achieving, accomplished, successful woman. And on the other hand, at the same time, I am also like overly in my feminine, sometimes to the point where it's problematic because, like you were saying, that there's light and there's shadow, right? There are aspects that are really supportive, and then if not in right relationship, it can really get in our way. And one of the shadows of the feminine is chaos,
Mm.
Mm,
because it's, she's all over the place, her intuition, and it's actually the masculine that holds the container. It's the
mm,
Mm-hmm.
masculine
Mm-hmm.
that holds the structure for the feminine to be able to move. But if there's no container for it, it's just all over the place. And that is my natural. I'm a Pisces, I'm a water sign, I'm super slippery. Like I can spend obscene amounts of time in a daydream, just, um, and my high achieving has been a like overcompensating and
Mm-hmm.
almost like over functioning
Yeah.
to compensate for this aspect of my, like, underneath the fact that, like, I'm actually really messy. Not like organized, like I'm,
Right.
but like I'm just kind of like all over the place, a little bit. And so for me, part of healing my feminine has actually been healing the masculine too, and finding right relationship with healthy structure inside of my life and healthy discipline and consistency that comes from love rather than punishment.
Right.
I was someone who, for most of my life, was at war with myself, and particularly at war with my body. And I used, controlling food and exercise as a way to, just grip so tightly. And so part of healing all of these has been, again, I keep coming back, right relationship with safe, stable, consistent action that comes from a place of love and support rather than punishment and not enoughness. Right. And same thing too with the feminine of, right, like having to kind of pull her in a little bit. rein her in.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Were you a good student growing up? Were you an A student? Were you a daydreamer who got in trouble in class?
Yeah, school's an interesting topic for me because the truth is I was a terrible student.
Okay.
However, I was really naturally talented.
Yeah, you're just smart.
Yeah. And so it honestly, it was one of the biggest challenges in my life of having to reconcile that, because also school was a safe place for me as a child. I loved school because I could contain all of my anxiety, all of my fear into, it was a safe place for me because I was a good student, I was smart, my teachers loved me, I was always the teacher's pet because I never had to try. Like, it was just naturally who I was. And so it was really safe. And then as I got older and into adolescence and my teen years, and, natural talent can only take you so far. And I was like just talented enough to be able to get by under the radar. Um, and so a lot of people didn't see actually me and what I was going through and what I was like, how
Like,
hard.
she's good. She's got this. She's okay.
Totally. And,
Yeah.
it's interesting because it's actually one of the points within myself where, through this process of accomplishing and succeeding, there was always this underlying, right, the fear of like not enough. And, people are going to realize that I'm actually not that smart.
Oh,
And
okay.
constantly like internally stripping myself of my accomplishments because, it's like I managed, I went to UCLA for my undergrad, but yet there was this story that I had of, if people really knew me, they'd see that because I'm not a perfect student, because I don't study, because I don't have color-coded flashcards, that therefore I'm not as worthy, as deserving of this degree. And so it was always a very just an interesting aspect of life for me, because I was not actually a straight A student. I was not type A in any way, shape, or form. But again, being, I was what they call a covert perfectionist. You have some perfectionists who are like really externally, like it's so clear, type A, this is who they are. I was the covert perfectionist where like it didn't necessarily look that way, but the felt experience inside my body was always one of like needing it to be perfect, but never giving myself permission to actually feel like it was perfect.
Yeah. I relate to that for
I
sure.
relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love, because I'm at a stage in my life where I've done the work. I know there's always going to be work. I've done the work. I've gotten to know myself. I've gotten to love myself. I've made sense of a lot of things that didn't make sense for all my life. And I'm fascinated about relationships and love and partnership. And you were married, divorced. I was married, divorced, but you are now remarried. And so I would love to hear from you your experience of how the work that you've done has created a different relationship experience, and what it is to be an embodied woman in that container.
Yeah. So it's yeah, I'm like, where do we start with this one? So much. And I do think that part of it is going back to my first marriage, and because that was such a piece of stepping forward in my truth. And um I was married for 10 years to my
Me
ex-husband.
too. Me too.
And I love my ex-husband. I love him so much, and I always loved him. And the love that I had for him was not the love that sustains a partnership in a marriage that I was desiring for myself. He was my best friend, and he was someone that I was very young when we made that transition from best friends into partners. Very young. And making the choice to walk away from that marriage was one of the hardest things I ever did, because the truth is the marriage was fine. Like, it was fine. And it could have, I could have stayed. I could have stayed and it would have been fine. But it's that place within ourselves of making a choice to leave something that is good because you know that there's something great. And to me, I feel like that's a harder choice to make than, if it was like, if the marriage was like just
Right.
and like we hated each other, there was abuse or anything, like there was like, he's a great man and he's a great father. I just wasn't. I was going somewhere else in my life and on a different path. And if I would have stayed in that marriage, it would have meant abandoning a part of myself that I just couldn't do. And so, that was, and again, there was a lot happening at that time in my life. It was when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and kind of has a way of just bringing everything into perspective. And I was already walking this path. I was already doing my work and putting the steps in to be able to get to that point where I recognized there's a truth in me that I need to pursue. And it was this desire to be in partnership where I could express myself, my sexuality, my desires. Like, that was such a big part of it. And I don't know about you guys, but I really think that these are parts of myself that, when I was in my 20s, I didn't even know. But in my 30s, right, like, you really start to like take ownership over desires and pleasure and all of that. And so there was this part that I needed to follow through on, that I needed to take steps forward. And when I met my now husband, oh my God. I mean, when I tell you that we walked through like the depths of hell to be where we are, I don't even think that would like scratch the surface of what we've really had to work through. But for me, what it comes down to is being with someone who shares the same values that I do in terms of the elevation of consciousness as individuals, as well as for the relationship. Because I think sometimes what can happen is it feels like one person is doing all the work, right? They're invested in the self-help, they're invested in like elevating, and their partner might be supportive, right? But if the partner is not as equally invested in their own growth, it can kind of create that chasm that can sometimes feel like it's not, it's we can't bridge it again.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, for me, the relationship piece has been, like I actually, he's the one who we'd have to talk to in terms of like he's doing the work,
Mhm.
which, first of all, is such a turn on.
Yeah,
Right? Like that helps the situation.
totally.
Right. But it allows for, it allows me to be able to express myself fully because he can hold it.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah.
Does
I
that answer
love
your
your
question?
courage and your
Ah,
vulnerability. It's
it
beautiful.
answers it and then some. It answers it and then some. Yes, thank you. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love so much everything that you just shared, but particularly, and this can be in terms of relationship, or this can be in terms of anything in our lives. You said it was good, but there was something in you that was calling you.
Yeah.
You knew there was more for you to experience. And that can be so painful. And it can also be so confusing for the people in our lives because they're like, why? Why do you have to leave? Why do you have to go? Like, and I've certainly had that experience in multiple areas of my life. And it's like, the only answer is because my soul is calling me for more.
Yeah.
My soul is calling me for more. And it continues to call me for more. And I'm like at a place in my life where I spent a lot of my life saying, no, I'm just going to try to be content with this. And my soul's like, okay. And then she comes back and she's like, are you ready to listen? I'm like, yes. Right. And so finally I got to the point in my life where I was like, okay, I am done ignoring you. I'm just going to keep saying yes. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes I don't know where it's taking me. Sometimes I'm kind of pissed off because it's not working out as quickly as I would like it to, but I don't have a choice. And I'm like, the answer is yes. Okay, here we go. Right?
Mhm. That's it.
The answer is yes, always.
Mhm.
Oh
Je-
my God, I love that.
Jen, I'm just, I've got a tear here because I was just relating to when you said that your second marriage, what you walked through together, and I was just going, ugh, right. Like, I think for me, I forget in the deepest sense. I know on a surface level, but you just dropped me into like the next level of, oh my God, how far have we come? Like, it's it's a miracle. So I loved hearing that part of your story of like just the work that you've done and where you've gotten to.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. So embodiment for you now in this new space that you're in, how does that work for you? How does it feel to you? I know you use the word embodiment in your coaching.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really the umbrella of all of the work that I do. And it's for someone like me who relied so heavily on my intellect, right? I could tell you everything you needed to hear, and I could tell you it in a way you could hear it and it made sense. And I hid behind it for so many years, right? It was part of like my ability to understand intellectually was part of what kept me safe.
Hmm.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so for me, everything changed when I really allowed myself to start living inside of my body rather than inside of my head.
Yeah.
Um, and so embodiment to me is that holistic integration, right, of all of the aspects of who we are and the aligned, like felt experience of our body. right? Like, when you are in relationship with someone who's really embodied in themselves, and when someone is not. Like, you can feel it, you can see it, you can see it in how someone moves, you can hear it in a tone, a voice. This is something, an area that I'm starting to become more and more curious about. It's interesting because intuitively I've always kind of picked up on it, but learning actually how to track more and understand people's voice tones and what it's communicating, because there's so much there too in terms of embodiment.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of that I think Amber and I know from acting from that world,
Mm-hmm.
like working with your voice as your instrument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about the archetype quiz that you have on your Instagram.
Mm.
We both took it.
Fun.
I love it. Yes, I love it.
It was spot on. And
Spot on.
so I'm curious, if you have any insights into Amber got the queen and I got the mother.
Which, by the way, in my first psilocybin journey that I ever did a couple years ago, that's what came through. And I was saying to the facilitator, I'm a queen. I'm a queen. And I was in this big, tall chair and I was like, I'm a queen. So I got the queen archetype. I'm like, okay, I like it. I take it.
Yeah. So kind of backstepping just a little bit to give some context around this. The work that I do is embodiment, yes. And also, another aspect of the work that I do that's so important is around parts integration. And there are many different ways that we can think of the parts, but basically the idea is that we each hold many different parts of ourselves. And we can think of these in terms of like typical internal family systems parts, where you have the manager and the firefighters. You can think about this in terms of Freud, when his id, ego, and super ego. You can think about this from a developmental perspective and inner child healing, where you have the inner child. And we can think about this in terms of the archetypes. So remembering, when it comes to the archetypes, again, this is an aspect of consciousness that exists on continuums, that we have all
Yeah.
of within us,
Yeah.
right? And when it's similar to any sort of an,
Categorization
exactly,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
Like
It's
whether
just like a
it's
way to deeper understand yourself.
totally, and so it's really helpful, I think, in one of two ways. One is knowing kind of your natural set point, right? Just me as I am, like, how do I show up? How do people experience me? What are the gifts of this, as well as what are some of the areas that can get in the way? It's also really helpful in terms of like expanding our expanding our embodiment, allowing ourselves to access and tune in to more of the multidimensional nature that we are, right? So especially like, right, you're the mother, and the mother can be very sweet and watery, and she's cradling, and it can feel so good to just hold yourself sometimes and give comfort that we need. And maybe, right, as a mother, you may need to adjust your crown a little bit more and stand in your role as a queen and find fierceness and
Yeah.
set your boundaries and remember that, you have power. Right? So there's, when we familiarize ourselves with these concepts, we can start to tune in and play with who is not only the woman that I am, but also the woman that I'm becoming.
Mm.
Right. And if I think about that, like if I want to tune in, I actually am wanting to be a little bit more of a warrior. I want to be a little bit more of a huntress. Okay.
I should just I just gotta quickly show you this. I'm moving the laptop. Just quick visual here. This is what I look at in my office every day. So for those listening, it's like, yes, it's the kind of mother healer, but then I've got these images of like Daenerys and Wonder Woman to kind of tap me into what you're talking about.
Right? Yes.
Mhm.
Right. Because there's again, these all exist within us. Different times, different situations are going to call for different parts of ourselves to emerge. And part of being embodied, I believe, is being able to authentically own and navigate the different hats and the different roles
Yeah.
we get to play, right? That we are.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. I would love to go back to the conversation about sexuality, your expression of sexuality. And, you know, in your first marriage, you loved him, he was wonderful, you were best friends. And there was also more for you to express that you felt like was not maybe perhaps available in that dynamic. I'm not sure, but I understand that. And I think as women, like, I think it's vital for us to have permission and to know that in order to really be embodied, at least for me, uh, I need to be able to express myself sexually and sensually in a full way, in a complete way, in a free way. And you know, that is very important to me. And I've had relationships where I felt that wasn't available to me, and I've had relationships where I felt like that is absolutely available to me. And it's really important to me. How did you discover that? What helps you tap into that? Was it your husband now that brought that out in you, or was it you finding that first and then feeling safe to express that?
Yeah, I think, I think this is such an important conversation because I think there is so much of there's so much available to us
Mhm,
in terms of our power
mhm,
and who we are and what we're capable of when we are allowed to connect to our sexuality. And again, part of the like the collective healing that's happening for women is that permission
mhm,
to be expressed and um without like violating someone else's story, um but wanting to share honestly. There was a suppression
mhm.
within myself of like really being seen in that way, um because I'm trying to like say this in a delicate way again to like honor
I understand.
husband. um like I think this happens for a lot of people in relationships where you get to a point where like you're like brother and sister or roommates that are living together and like friends.
Yep.
And I think a lot of women settle and think that that's normal and that that's
Mm.
like
Like that's the end. Oh
and
wow.
yeah. And there was, again, I was, my mid-30s kind of coming into like really finding and like just starting to tap the surface of what was available to me in this way. Um, and also knowing that, sex isn't enough to make or break a relationship, obviously, right? Um, but for me, it was, I had within me.
Depending on the person, right? To back up to that statement,
Yeah.
depending on the person. Because I think for someone like what was Amber was expressing, I think for her it could make or break a relationship because of how vital it is to her. But other
Well,
people, I feel like it's not a priority. Is that what you're
yeah.
saying?
Well, what I was meaning was actually more in terms of like you can't necessarily, like, you can't rely on sex to sustain.
Right.
Yes.
That was kind of
Right.
more of what I
I
meant.
see what, okay,
It can be
gotcha.
a priority, but it can't be the only glue that holds
Got it.
together.
Got it.
Yeah.
Right. And like the other side of it is like right, like, as like it should be, that should, I don't like shoulds, but like that deep desire to honor of like, I want this to be a high value.
Mm-hmm.
And I really truly, and this is me, this was like my work and my kind of commitment to myself, was this internal declaration that I get to be in a partnership with someone who is my best friend,
Mhm.
who I love deeply, and who I'm so freaking turned on and attracted to. And we get to have amazing sex. Right?
Yeah.
I was like, internally, I was like, that's what I, that's what I want. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was the energy that I was leading with in terms of this relationship. And I was really honest with my husband from the beginning because it was very fresh. I did not have a lot of time in between relationships, and I was very transparent from the beginning of like, this is who I am, this is what I'm looking for. Are you willing to be the person who can support me through this process of like really seeing what I'm capable of and what is here for me? And of course he
I
said
love it.
yes.
Right?
No.
I
How,
love that so much. Yeah, it's so important to me to hear that because I think there's some, well, there's some shame around um, even wanting that to be a priority, right? And there's also, for me, a limiting belief that I carried with me that it had to be either or. It was either going to be the best friend or it was going to be the hot, amazing, passionate sex.
Right.
And I am at a place in my life right now where I recognize what is important to me. And um, as much as I want partnership, I am also not willing to compromise what is on the top of my list of,
Yeah.
priority. And
And again, I think this is one of those lies that we've been sold, is exactly
yeah,
yeah,
that.
that's
yeah,
right.
That
Yeah.
it's either or. And of course it takes work, right? Like it's
Mhm. Mhm.
the newness always fizzles out.
right.
Right.
And
I was
so
gonna ask you, how long have you been in the new marriage?
we've been married for 1 year and together for 5.
Okay. So
Yeah.
6 years?
Total
No,
5.
total 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You still got it going on. That's pretty
Still having hot, amazing sex. Good. I love it.
good.
I love it.
Yeah. And I think it's just it's so important, again, whether it's sex or work or friendship or family relationships, to give ourselves permission to be in that place where we own, this is my truth.
Yeah.
And granted, sometimes our truths can change and it doesn't necessarily have to be a fixed permanent place or position, but in this moment, in this season of my life, this is who I am. These are my values. And I'm actually not going to compromise on them, because I think that for so many of us, this, we've worn compromise as a virtue. And it's really hindered. It's, part of what I think so many people just expect from
Totally.
women. And it's right at, it's in that line of like being small and self-abandoning and
Yeah.
Yeah.
the fear of standing and holding, these are my needs, these are my values, these are my desires, and I'm not compromising on them. And I think when we stand in that, like authentically stand in that, there's a magnetism, right? There's a natural, just like a magnet repels and attracts, right? The ones that are drawn to it and can appreciate it and can see it and hold it and honor it, they will find their way. And the ones that are going to judge it or shame it or condemn it or whatever, like those get to fall away to the side.
Yeah. Amen.
Beautiful. I'm curious about your Costa Rican experiences. Is there anything you feel like sharing about how magical those are?
I mean, where would you like to begin with Costa Rica? I can do this all the time. Like, which part of Costa Rica are we talking about? Are we talking? um, yeah, actually, like, is there a specific piece of Costa Rica?
I mean, I've been there twice. Once
Yeah.
was on a women's retreat, once was with family. Both times were magical. I saw on your Instagram that you take people there.
Yeah, we have a retreat coming up in May, which I'm so excited for. And part of the magic of Costa Rica for both me and my husband, this will be our, I think, sixth time going together.
Mm.
It's also where we started our plant medicine journey.
I
Was
saw that.
in Costa Rica back in 2020 was the first time we went for a week-long ayahuasca retreat, which completely, I mean, that's a whole other,
Yes.
Episode.
like just like talk about a like trajectory change, course change in my life. It's really hard to go and drink ayahuasca in the jungles of Costa Rica for 4 days and then just come back to life as usual.
Mm.
But working with psychedelics is such an integral part of the work that I do now and support. And it has a way of bypassing so much of the ego's like grasping for control and understanding, and just like instant clarity around connection
Mm.
and God and purpose, right?
I have not had an ayahuasca experience yet. I've only heard about it. I've had several psilocybin journeys that were facilitated or together with Amber or, on my own. Recently, I had one on my own, which was really interesting, with Amber kind of distantly holding space. But um, I don't know exactly, but it seems similar in what you're
Uh,
saying.
yeah. So yeah. And the thing with psilocybin, and I love psilocybin. I love supporting clients with it and holding that space for facilitation and the work that's possible with psilocybin as well as ketamine and MDMA. Ayahuasca, with psilocybin, there's an aspect that you can still kind of like have your body
Your
and
bearings.
tune in and be like, okay, like this is what's going on. My feet are still on planet Earth.
Mhm.
Right.
Whereas with ayahuasca, it's it can be quite challenging, especially for people like myself who like to be in control,
Mhm.
because it's like the more you try and keep control, like the worse it's going to be for you.
Sure.
And it's really an invitation for complete surrender. And when done and held safely and properly, it can be really, really therapeutic and really healing.
Can you, because you have years of experience working as a therapist, as a doctor of psychology, and so I'd love to hear. I know we're getting close to the end here, but what is your takeaway, or your main message, I guess, um, with working with clients in more of like a talk therapy setting versus facilitating with assisted psychedelic?
Yeah. I can sit and I can talk with you, and I can talk for the next 10 years.
Mm.
I can tell you every which way until next Sunday, all of the reasons why I am the way that I am. I, you know, but here's the thing, insight does not bring about change.
Okay.
And this is, for me, this was always the point of stagnation with talk therapy as it is.
Okay.
There is value to insight, but it can only take you so far, right? If you don't do something with the insight, nothing is going to change. And actually, the same is true for psychedelics. And then I think a lot of people come to psychedelics thinking that, oh, I'm just going to take this journey and then my whole life is going to change. But if you don't do something, right, the medicine does like 10% of the work, right? It's up to us and what we do with what's gained inside of that experience to go and make changes. Now, the difference in terms of like, why are psychedelics so impactful versus just talking about it? There's a lot of different things that we can point to. One, we can look at the studies on what's actually happening physiologically inside of the brain and the neural pathways that are being stimulated and turned on, which is part of what creates space for more options, right? When we're just talking in our everyday life, we are talking from the same filters, the same stories. 90% of the thoughts are repeated thoughts that we've been having for the over and over and over for the same, years of our lives. When you're inside of when you ingest psilocybin or any of these other medicines, you start, bringing online more of the brain, which allows for more creativity, more ability for problem solving, which is a big component. And it's what all of the research is going to guide you towards. So great, so important. Big fan of like microdosing, super helpful for these things. But there's another piece that I think gets overlooked sometimes in the research. But what I think almost everybody can touch on and speak to when you've had this experience is when you work with psychedelics, you can see your place inside of a bigger picture. Right? We're opening ourselves up to greater consciousness, to God, to the universe. You can see beyond the smallness of the self. And for me, I think this is one of the most impactful parts of why psychedelics can be healing, is because it allows us to give meaning in a world that can sometimes be very hard to find meaning in, and to really believe that there's purpose, there is something beyond, something bigger than our everyday lives.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I experienced that as the oneness. Yes.
Amazing. Perfectly described and explained.
You're so dynamic. You've got all of the, doctor backing, the psychology, the research, everything you talked about. Like you could talk for days. And then you've got this embodiment piece that you've integrated into your work. And then even being able to talk about the sexuality and the freedom and the, making these hard choices in your life. And you really are the whole package. So I can see how you easily serve lots of different women and in a very powerful way. So yeah, thank you again for your work, and the way that you deliver, I think, is the most important thing, your message, because it's all felt in how you're saying everything. Like you were talking about with the voice, you're so gentle, you're so kind, you're so loving, you're so patient. It's really lovely to be
Thank you.
around.
Well, I mean, thank you. I received that. I really do. And I appreciate that reflection. It's something within myself. I've come a very long way in terms of, my ability to really allow myself permission to step forward as a healer in my life. And what it means to be a healer for me, it's, I'm not actually doing anything to anybody, right? But it's the full embodiment of who I am, which is, the safe place. I really do pride myself on being a woman that people can come to and they can feel seen and they can feel heard and they can feel held. And for me, my embodiment, I go between all of them, but the wise woman, right? And like allowing myself that permission to stand fully, especially at this phase in my life. I'm about to be 43 next week. And just realizing the gifts that are available at this stage in our lives, and how like truly powerful we are when we are ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And so I so appreciate that reflection and receive it fully with an open heart.
Where do you want people to find you?
Oh, you can find me on Instagram. That's the best place. I do hang out there quite a bit. It's a been a little touch and go over the years, but I've found myself a good little system right now. So yeah, you can find me at Instagram. It's Dr. with 2 N's, Chrisman.
Beautiful. I want to also acknowledge you, and I kind of feel like I want to start weeping just from the beauty and the vulnerability and the openness that you are sharing with us. And I think that the women that are showing up now, who are holding space as healers, are also bringing in their own stories and experiences and having a willingness to share them. And I know I find myself in that space of wanting to be open about my experiences, because I think that's one thing that I have done therapy and I love therapy. And there's something about knowing that the person who's sitting across from me has also experienced some of the things that I've experienced, and they're open with it. There's a safety, like you said, and there's a trust that is developed, and there's a healing of knowing that we are seen and we are understood.
Well, and I think on the flip side of that, right, the healing that comes from being able to share our stories.
Yeah.
And, really quickly, I'll just touch on this because it is so important. I went into this profession to help people, but to help people from over here.
Right.
Like I was trained in a very like classical psychodynamic format where like I was here, people like, if someone, I was taught that if people asked if I was married, to like reflect the question back to them. So there was always this
Yeah.
aspect that I was like professionally raised to hide.
Yes.
Hide who
Yes.
I was. And so part of my healing and that like stripping away of my role as a therapist, and I think that so many therapists are naturally doing this, and I'm not putting down the field in any way, it just wasn't the right fit for me, but it was this like stepping forward and actually sharing, like
Yeah.
I'm a woman walking this path too.
Right.
And it's actually the medicine is not the degree.
I think like you were talking about with the continuum though, I think there's that balance of like when's the right time to share. Obviously, you have to not just be like, and then I felt that way too.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, let me make it all about me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
We're
yeah,
all
I think
learning.
we're finding our way, like the transparency, but also like, I got the structure for you here. Yes.
Right.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes. And this is what you offer. This is one of the things that you offer. You have a school for and a certification for coaches to learn how to best
Yes.
bring all of who they are into serving.
It's actually one of my most favorite things that I do. I love, there's so many amazing coaches and healers and people doing this work. But they're not doing it with any support or mentorship in terms of how to really refine
Mm-mm.
their gifts and, exactly like you're saying, these nuances
Mhm.
of, you know, coaching is an art, right?
Mhm.
Work with people, there's an art to it and there's science. And, I just love supporting people and actually learning how to cultivate their craft so that they're doing this work with integrity, and safety.
Yes, so important. Oh my gosh, you're amazing.
You are amazing.
So are you. Thank you. We are
Aw,
amazing.
we are amazing. Yes. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that we have not touched on that you feel you would really love to share? 'Cause, I mean, we've touched on a lot, but
We touched on a lot. I feel complete. I'm sure. I mean, I
okay.
could go another whole hour,
Yeah.
Yeah,
but yes,
another day.
another day, another time. Yeah.
Well, to know you is to love you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jen.
thank
Have
you
an
so
amazing day.
much.
And I'll see you tomorrow
I'll see
at
you
Hot
tomorrow.
Pilates.
Hot and sweaty.
Hot and sweaty. All right. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, I
That was
love
amazing.
her.
I know.
I love your guests. You have the best guests. So good.
Yeah, everybody we bring on, everybody that you bring on, everybody we do. We bring on really special people. I love when I get to bring somebody on that I've known in like different ways, but haven't
Yeah.
ever really had these kinds of conversations at the depth that we get to.
Yeah.
And it's just so fun. It's the intimacy that we all crave. And
Yeah. I mean, I'm like a total addict to that type of intimacy, as you know.
yeah. Yes,
I could eat that intimacy all day long.
I know. I know. Oh
You're
God.
like, don't I know it? Oh,
Good. I mean, it's part of the human experience is a desire to connect on a deep. Well, yes, everybody there's a spectrum. I think some people,
exactly. Yeah.
and I have found in my life often that I haven't met people that are wanting to experience the depth that I do. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love what
It's not everyone that
it's
can
not everyone
go, that wants to go deep.
that has a desire. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote about that in my book, like when I was talking about
You don't want to talk about hummus.
yeah, like how Glennon Doyle when she did like like whatever, like 25 things to know about me, and how she shared these like super intimate, like personal, aspects of herself, and other people were talking about more surface. And I remember reading that, just going, yes, that's me. Like I would, you know, with wonderful people. I'm not saying anything negative, but like, these like backyard, barbecues. And I'm finding myself going, I'm not enjoying this conversation. I don't really care about talking about that other couple's marital problems. Like, why are they having marital problems? That's what I want to know. And I want to talk to them about it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I mean, I literally blurted out. I showed that in my book. Like, there was a time when they were talking about, this couple and their marital issues. And I was like, well, we've been on the verge of divorce for several years now. And I was like, shit, I want to say it now before I leave the party and they talk about my
Right.
problems,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we all have stuff.
I'm like that. And there's a quote that I saw years ago that was like, I showed up, I made it awkward, I left.
Yeah.
That's me. I will make it awkward. I mean, I'm not as bad anymore. I've learned like, okay, I can
Read the room.
I can
Read the
hold
room.
back. I can hold back. But yeah, when you start feeling like you have to speak your truth all the time, I think there is like a natural kind of ebb and flow of like, well, where is the extreme this way so I can like find the middle?
Mhm.
Because when you want to be a truth teller, which I think you and I both are, it
Mhm.
it can be challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And I think it's interesting. I've noticed for myself, I feel like I used to be more like I thought I was being a truth teller, but really what I was doing was I was being triggered by someone else and wanting to prove my point that I was right.
There's that
And
too, for
so
sure.
now I find myself being more quiet often,
Yes.
not needing to share my truth, which is really just me needing to prove my point. And so I'm like, like finding the balance of like being a truth teller and in the circumstances that, is calling for it and figuring it out. Like,
Yes, you have to be invited in. You have to be invited in. And
right, right.
it just depends on the circumstance.
It
Yeah.
depends.
I mean,
Yeah, it
this
depends.
is a whole episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I love everything that she talked about. I think one of my favorite things that we talked about with her
yeah,
was when she was so sweet and so vulnerable about her first marriage
yeah,
and how like the pain of leaving something that was really good
yeah.
because her soul was calling her to experience and express more. And I
Hmm.
think that um, the people that listen to our podcast and that find us, um, not necessarily that they have to leave a marriage or have to leave a situation, but there is an inner calling for more in some capacity. And so I just want to acknowledge that and say, like, it's okay that you're wanting more, because I know for me, for a lot of years, um, I wanted to quiet that voice that wanted more because it felt like it was too painful, like it was too risky, and I didn't want to leave situations. But I mean, you can only try to ignore the voice that's calling for more for so long, right? Until it gets louder and louder. And so I think I just want to acknowledge anyone who's listening who is having that call for more in any area of their life, that like it's okay to honor that. It's okay to honor that. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're selfish. It doesn't mean that you want something that is wrong. It means that your inner calling is calling you to something that you are here to experience and express, and that's okay. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you, Siri. That was wonderful.
Love you.
Love you too.
All
Bye,
right, guys.
everybody.
Thanks for listening.